The secret to a perfect pastrami on rye is threefold. 1. The bread. It must be a high-quality, double-baked rye, sturdy enough to contain the payload, but soft enough that it yields without a fight. 2. The mustard. A sharp, spicy brown deli mustard applied with surgical precision, not so much that it overwhelms, but enough to cut through the richness of the meat. 3. And this is the most important, the pastrami itself. It must be hand-carved, glistening with fat, piled so high it's a structural impossibility. A tower of pepper-crusted, smoky, briny perfection. I had achieved this work of art. It sat on a paper plate on my obsessively clean desk, a monument to a Tuesday afternoon that was, against all odds, threatening to be peaceful. My office at Phoenix Restoration is my sanctuary, a minimalist cube of glass and steel, a silent rebuke to the chaos I wrestle for a living. Out there, the world is a mess of burst pipes, kitchen fires, and questionable life choices. In here, there is order. There is quiet. And there was, for a fleeting moment, my sandwich. Then the phone rang. Not my business line, which chirps politely with inquiries about mold remediation in suburban basements, not my cell phone, which buzzes with texts from my crew. This was the other one, the red phone. Metaphorically, anyway. It was my private line, a direct link to a handful of people who only call when the sky is actively falling. The caller ID glowed with 3 words that turned my stomach to ice. Chief Miller. I stared at my sandwich, a perfect slice of a life I was not meant to live. I took a deep, calming breath, picked up the receiver, and activated my professional, seen-it-all-before voice. Leo, please tell me it's not a body in a wood chipper again. The paperwork on that was a nightmare. Leo! The voice on the other end was a high-pitched squeal of pure panic. Chief Miller, a man who normally sounded like a gravel truck idling, was ascending into a register I didn't know he possessed. She did it! The crazy HOA lady! She flooded the evidence room, the whole thing! My brain stuttered. I get a lot of weird calls. A disgruntled employee turning on the fire sprinklers at a server farm. A fraternity trying to build a swimming pool in their living room. But this was a new one. Whoa, slow down, Chief. What crazy HOA lady? Carol! He shrieked. From the Gnome War, your neighbor, she did it! A cold dread, familiar and profound, washed over me. Carol. Of course. The universe, in its infinite and cruel wisdom, had decided to weave the 2 most irritating threads of my life together. My job and my homeowners association. I looked at the digital clock on my desk. 3:14 p.m. The main water line in the basement maintenance closet, Miller gasped, the words tumbling out. She must have cranked it until it burst. It's a waterfall, Leo. The pipe blew 4 minutes ago. I need you. I need the team. I looked longingly at my pastrami on rye, a fallen soldier in a war I hadn't even known I was fighting. I closed my eyes. Goodbye, peace. Goodbye, perfection. Consider the crime scene recovery team deployed, I said, my voice deadpan. I'm on my way. You can't truly understand a person's soul until you've argued with them about yard fixtures. My first, and until today only, encounter with Carol was the stuff of suburban legend. I call it the Gnome War of 24. It was a beautiful Saturday morning last spring. I was in my own front yard, in the quiet, obsessively manicured enclave of Maple Creek Estates, a place I lived in for the simple reason that it was 5 minutes from my office. I was installing a small, tasteful, entirely inoffensive Japanese stone lantern next to my walkway. It was about 2 feet tall, carved from granite, and radiated a quiet, zen-like energy. What do you think you're doing? The voice cut through the chirping of the birds like a thrown hatchet. I turned. There she was. Carol. Clipboard in hand, visor pulled down low, a look on her face like she'd just caught me burying a body. "Good morning, Carol," I said, mustering a neighborly smile. "Just adding a little curb appeal." She marched onto my lawn, her sneakers leaving faint impressions in the perfectly dewy grass. She tapped the lantern with a blood-red fingernail. "This is an unapproved yard fixture." "It's a lantern," I said, my smile tightening. "It is," she consulted her clipboard. "Gnome-adjacent paraphernalia. Section C, paragraph 4 of the bylaws clearly states that all decorative yard items, including but not limited to gnomes, flamingos, gazing balls, and whimsical statuary, must be pre-approved by the Architectural Review Committee." I stared at her. "This is a solid block of granite, Carol. The only thing whimsical about it is the thought that it could possibly offend someone." "The committee is the arbiter of whimsy, Mr. Romano, not you." Her eyes narrowed. "I don't see an approval form on file. I'm going to have to write you up." That's when I made my mistake. I chuckled. It was a small, incredulous laugh. "You're going to write me up for a rock?" Her face hardened into a mask of pure, distilled fury. "This is your first warning. A second violation will incur a $50 fine. A third will incur a $100 fine and a formal review of your residency status." My professionalism, the calm demeanor I used to talk people down from chemical spills and sewage backups, evaporated. "A review of my residency status. Are you going to have me evicted from the house I own because you have a personal vendetta against decorative geology? While we're at it, do I need to submit my recycling bin for architectural review? Is the color of my welcome mat too provocative?" "Sarcasm is the last refuge of the non-compliant," she sniffed. I stood up, dusting the dirt from my knees. "You know, Carol," I said, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "I couldn't help but notice that your prize-winning rose bushes over there are a good 6 inches inside the 5-foot utility setback ordinance. That's a Section F, paragraph 2 violation. A real shame if a city inspector were to, just happen to be in the area." The look she gave me could have curdled milk from a mile away. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. A blood feud had been declared. The Gnome War had begun. I never did move the lantern, and every Tuesday, like clockwork, a new violation notice appeared in my mailbox. Unapproved mulch color, excessive lawn height by 1/4 of an inch, a non-standard mailbox flag. I had ignored them all. I had foolishly assumed that was the extent of her power. I had gravely underestimated my enemy. Arriving at the Oak Haven Police Department was like pulling up to the scene of a very polite, very bureaucratic shipwreck. Water was seeping from under the heavy glass front doors, creating a slick, shimmering welcome mat on the concrete steps. 2 young cops, looking utterly lost, were trying to build a barricade using a dozen evidence bags filled with what looked like dirt from a potted ficus tree in the lobby. It was the most pathetic sandbagging operation I had ever seen. I almost took a picture from my company's What Not to Do training manual. I pushed past them, my work boots sloshing on the linoleum. The lobby smelled of damp carpet and despair. Chief Miller, a big, barrel-chested man who normally radiated an aura of unflappable authority, looked like a drowned bear. His uniform trousers were soaked to the knee, clinging to his legs. He saw me, and his face flooded with a level of relief that was frankly terrifying. "Leo, thank God." "Chief," I said, scanning the scene, "you've redecorated. Very aquatic." "Don't start," he groaned. "It's worse than I said. It's a total loss down there." Before he could elaborate, a gruff, stocky man in a rumpled suit and a truly unfortunate tie strode over. He had a graying, flat-top haircut and a face that looked like it had been chiseled from a block of granite and then left out in the rain. "So, this is your guy Miller?" he said, his voice a low grumble. He looked me up and down with open skepticism. Looks like a barista. Leo, this is Detective Harding, Miller said, wringing his hands. Harding, Leo Romano, he's the best. It's just water, Harding grumbled, gesturing vaguely at the puddles. We were going to get the janitor and a couple of mops. I had to physically restrain myself from laughing in his face. My internal monologue, however, was having a field day. The janitor? Does the janitor have a certification in microbial remediation, Detective? Does his mop bucket come with a guarantee against destroying a felony conviction? With all due respect, Detective, I said, my voice dripping with forced politeness. I think we might be a little beyond the mop and bucket stage. Just then, a young, fresh-faced officer with bright eyes and a crisply pressed uniform hurried over. He practically vibrated with nervous energy. "Mr. Romano, sir?" he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Officer Ramirez. Wow, it's an honor. I follow Phoenix Restoration on Instagram. The hazmat cleanup at the chemical plant last year? The drone footage was epic." I gave him a tired, appreciative smile. An ally, a fanboy, but an ally nonetheless. "Good to have you aboard, Ramirez. You can start by telling those two Einsteins outside that evidence bags are not, in fact, waterproof." Miller clapped me on the shoulder. "Come on, you need to see it." He led me through a set of double doors and down a concrete stairwell. With every step down, the air grew colder, the sound of rushing water grew louder, and the smell of damp earth and wet paper intensified. He stopped in front of a heavy steel door marked Evidence Intake and Storage. "Brace yourself," he said, and pushed it open. I've been in the disaster business for 15 years. I've seen houses filled to the ceiling with sewage. I've cleaned up meth labs that looked like abstract art installations. I once had to recover a priceless collection of antique books from a flooded museum basement. But what I saw in that room made my professional jaw go slack. It wasn't a room anymore. It was a grotto. The basement was submerged in at least a foot of churning, murky water. A torrent was cascading from the ceiling where a thick pipe, maybe 6 inches in diameter, had a jagged gash in its side. It wasn't a leak, it was a severed artery. Cardboard boxes, their sides printed with case numbers and dates, were bobbing in the current, slowly dissolving into brown pulp. Their contents were spilling out, creating a morbid confetti of plastic baggies, manila envelopes, and soggy paperwork. Evidence from hundreds, maybe thousands of cases, drug busts, burglaries, assaults, was floating in a single, horrifying soup. I saw a baggie of what was likely marijuana drift by, bumping gently against a sealed container holding a handgun. A stack of case files, their pages swollen to twice their normal thickness, floated past like a dying jellyfish. The chain of custody hadn't just been broken, it had been drowned, dismembered, and was now performing a slow, tragic ballet in the basement of the Oak Haven Police Department. Detective Harding, standing beside me, let out a low groan. "Sweet mother of—" "So," he said, turning to me with a defiant look, as if this were somehow my fault. "We fish it out, right? Get some nets." I finally looked at him, my carefully constructed professional mask cracking. "And what, you gonna dry it with a hairdryer, Detective?" I snapped, the sarcasm I'd been suppressing finally boiling over. "Lay it all out in the sun? The district attorney is going to love that. Your Honor, the key evidence in this murder trial was briefly used as a bath toy, but we're pretty sure it's fine." Chief Miller looked like he was going to be sick. "Leo, what do we do?" I took a deep breath, pushing my sleeves up. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by the cold, clear focus that was the reason I could charge what I charge. My brain started cataloging, triaging, planning. "First," I said, my voice now hard and commanding, "nobody goes in there, nobody touches anything. The entire room is a compromised scene. Second, Ramirez. The young officer straightened up. Sir. Get me the building schematics. I need to know what that pipe is and where the shutoff valve is. And find me the main electrical panel for this wing. We're going dark. Yes, sir. He scurried off, happy to have a mission. I turned back to Harding and Miller. Third, you two are going to stand right here and make sure nobody with a bright idea and a fishing net gets within 50 feet of this door. I pulled out my phone, my thumb already hovering over my favorites list. It was time to deploy the team. My first call was to Maria. Maria is my operations manager, my second in command, my work wife, and the most terrifyingly organized human being on the planet. If I'm the surgeon, she's the entire operating room staff rolled into one. Leo, she answered, her voice calm as a Zen garden. Maria, full deployment, Protocol 7. There was a half-second pause. Protocol 7 was our internal code for catastrophic institutional failure with high-value assets. We'd only used it twice before, once for the museum flood and once for a fire at a research lab that housed irreplaceable genetic samples. On my way, she said without another word. Mobile command unit? And the coffee, gallons of it, the industrial-sized urn. 10-4. Click. My second call was to Gus. Gus is the other side of the Phoenix restoration coin. He's a giant of a man, built like a vending machine with a head, who speaks in grunts and communicates primarily through sheer, unadulterated competence. He's our heavy equipment guru, our logistics muscle. Gus, I said when he picked up. Boss, he rumbled, bring Big Bertha. Big Bertha was our pride and joy, a trailer-mounted industrial water pump that could drain a swimming pool in about 8 minutes. And the LGRs, all of them. Low-grain refrigerant dehumidifiers, the big guns, and a wetsuit. There was a pause. Seriously? I have never been more serious in my entire life, Gus. Huh. Click. Within 15 minutes, the cavalry arrived. It was a sight to behold. Maria pulled up in our mobile command unit, a converted 30-foot RV that was packed to the gills with more technology than a NASA control room. It hummed with the quiet power of its own generator. Gus followed in our largest truck, towing a trailer that held Big Bertha and a platoon of industrial-sized blue dehumidifiers that looked like alien pods. Their arrival had an immediate effect. The scattered, panicked energy in the police station parking lot snapped into focus. Officer Ramirez looked like he might ask for an autograph. Detective Harding just stared, his jaw slightly agape, as Gus, a mountain in a company polo shirt, hopped out of the truck and began unhitching the pump with terrifying efficiency. Maria met me at the door, tablet in hand, already tapping away. Schematics are uploaded. I've cross-referenced the burst pipe. It's a 6-inch main water line. The shutoff is in a sub-basement utility closet, location marked. Electrical panel is in the West Wing maintenance room, also marked. You're a goddess, I said. I know, she replied, not looking up from her screen. I've started a new project file. Chain of custody protocol will be digital. Everything gets photographed in situ, assigned a barcode, scanned, and its condition logged before it's moved. She led me to the double doors, where she was already directing 2 of her junior techs to set up a folding table, waterproof laptops, and a series of barcode scanners. It was a makeshift command center, an island of order in an ocean of chaos. I gathered the key players, me, Maria, Chief Miller, and a still skeptical Detective Harding. All right, here's the battle plan, I said, pointing towards the flooded doorway like a general planning an amphibious assault. Phase 1, power and pump. Gus is heading for the shutoff valve now. Maria will direct an electrician, who is on his way, to kill the power to this entire wing. Safety first. Then Gus hooks up Big Bertha and we get the standing water out. I held up a finger. Phase 2, triage and removal. Once the water is out, my team goes in. We'll be in full PPE. We don't know what's in that water. Everything, and I mean everything, gets photographed where it sits. It gets a barcode. It gets logged in Maria's system. Then it is carefully bagged and moved to a secure, dry location which you, I pointed at Miller, are going to find for me right now. An empty office, a classroom, whatever. It needs to be clean, dry, and lockable. I looked directly at Harding. Phase 3, drying and restoration. Once the room is empty, my team deploys about $1 million worth of equipment to turn that room from a swamp into a desert. We're talking air movers, industrial-grade dehumidifiers, and moisture meters. We dry the structure to prevent mold, which would be an even bigger nightmare. No one, and I mean no one, touches a single piece of evidence except my team. Every item will be tracked from the moment we log it to the moment we hand it back to you. Am I clear? Harding folded his arms, his face a mask of defiance. My guys can handle the removal. We'll bag and tag it. I had reached the end of my patience for bureaucratic machismo. I took a step closer to him, lowering my voice. Detective, with all due respect, your guys are trained to handle perps, not preserve the integrity of 500 grams of waterlogged cocaine evidence. Does your departmental training manual have a chapter on preventing ink bleed on a signed confession when it's been marinating for an hour in what is essentially toilet water? Because my company's manual does. It's Chapter 4. It's very detailed. Harding's face flushed red. He opened his mouth to argue, but Chief Miller cut him off. He's right, Harding, the chief said, his voice heavy with resignation. This is their scene now. You and your men will stand down and provide whatever support Mr. Romano needs. End of discussion. Harding snapped his mouth shut, shooting me a look that could kill small animals. I just gave him a tight, professional smile. Now for the last piece of the puzzle. I walked into a quiet corner of the hallway and dialed my go-to electrician, a grizzled veteran of the trades named Dave, whose business card just said, "Sparky Dave, I make it work." He picked up on the second ring. Yeah? Dave, it's Leo. I'm at the police station. A long, weary sigh traveled through the phone. It was the sigh of a man who has seen the absolute dumbest things humanity can do with wires. How bad? Basement evidence room is a swimming pool. Another sigh, this one deeper, more profound. Sweet mother of code violations. Tell me you didn't let any cops try to fix it. I got here first, thankfully. I'll be there in 20, he grunted. You're buying the beer for the next year. Deal, I said, and hung up. The pieces were in place. The team was assembled. The plan was in motion. It was going to be a long, wet, miserable night, but it was under control. Or so I thought. Because that's when Gus's voice crackled over Maria's radio. Maria? Leo? We got a problem. Gus does not do problems. Gus solves them, usually with brute force or a specialized wrench. For him to admit to a problem meant it was something serious. I grabbed a radio from Maria's belt. Talk to me, Gus. The shut-off valve, he said, his voice strained. It's not just a water main. It's next to the primary sewage line for the West Wing. And the pipe burst took a chunk out of that, too. Silence fell over our little command center. Maria, Miller, and I all exchanged a look of pure, unadulterated horror. Gus, I said slowly, are you telling me this isn't just water? Boss? He said. And I could hear the disgust in his voice even through the static. This is a Category 3 biohazard scene. We're swimming in evidence. And everything else. My internal monologue started screaming. Category 3, black water grossly contaminated. This changed everything. It wasn't just a flood anymore. It was a toxic waste dump. The cost of this job didn't just double or triple. It went supernova. The health risks, the decontamination protocols, the sheer unholy foulness of it all. I walked over to Chief Miller, whose face had gone a shade of gray I usually only see on corpses. "Biohazard? In the evidence room?" he whispered, as if saying it too loud would make it more real. I nodded grimly. "Yep, everything in that room is now officially evidence and a potential source of E. coli, hepatitis, and about 1,000 other things you don't want to read about. Congratulations, Chief. Your station is now a Superfund site." I paused, then added, "My biohazard surcharge is 30%, by the way, just so we're clear." Miller looked like he was going to faint. And that, right on cue, is when the devil herself walked in. Carol. She didn't slink in, filled with remorse. She didn't creep in, afraid of the consequences. She stormed into the police station lobby, which was now a chaotic hive of activity with my team setting up containment barriers and Gus running a massive hose from Big Bertha out the front door. She had her clipboard. She was on a mission. She marched right past the yellow caution, biohazard cleanup in progress tape, ignoring the 2 officers trying to stop her, and slammed her hand down on the front desk. "I need to file a noise complaint," she announced to the terrified-looking desk sergeant. "There are loud generators and trucks running outside. This is a clear violation of City Ordinance 74B regarding excessive decibels in a commercial zone after 4 p.m. I will not have my peace disturbed." I watched, mesmerized. The sheer galaxy-sized audacity of it was almost beautiful. Here was the arsonist, returning to the scene of the fire to complain that the sirens were too loud. Miller, Harding, and I just stared. It was Leo who finally moved. I walked over to her slowly, feeling a strange sense of calm descend over me. "Carol," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Are you kidding me?" She spun on me, her eyes blazing with the fire of 1,000 suns. "You! This is your fault! Your monstrous trucks are blocking the street and the noise is unacceptable. I have a sensitive ficus tree that is under extreme stress." She thrust a piece of paper at me. It was an official HOA violation notice for noise pollution. Before I could formulate a response that wouldn't get me arrested, Chief Miller snapped. It was a glorious thing to witness. The years of pent-up bureaucratic frustration, the stress of the flood, the sheer unmitigated insanity of Carol, it all erupted. "Enough!" he roared, his voice booming through the lobby and silencing everything. He strode over, his face a thunderous shade of purple. "Carol, you are standing in a police station that you flooded, filled with what is now legally considered raw sewage, complaining about the noise from the people who are trying to prevent every criminal case for the last 5 years from being thrown out of court. Get out of my building." He pointed a trembling finger at the door. "Get out now before I arrest you for being the most infuriating human being on God's green earth." He waved over 2 burly officers. "Escort Miss Davison out, and if she sets 1 foot back on this property, arrest her for trespassing." As they dragged her away, still shrieking about her rights and her taxes and the delicate constitution of her ficus, I caught Harding looking at me. For the first time, there was a flicker of something other than contempt in his eyes. Maybe it was solidarity. Maybe it was the shared trauma of witnessing peak Karen. The moment of dark comedy was shattered by a cry of anguish from the evidence room doorway. It was Harding's voice. We rushed back to see him standing at the edge of the now damp concrete floor, staring at a corner of the room. Gus's pump had removed the bulk of the water, leaving behind a slick of disgusting gray sludge and a landscape of soggy, ruined boxes. "No, no, no," Harding was muttering, his face ashen. I followed his gaze. He was looking at a large, reinforced cardboard box on the bottom shelf of a metal rack. The shelf itself had partially collapsed, and the box had been completely submerged. It was dark with moisture, its seams splitting. The label, written in thick black marker, was chillingly clear. State v. Councilman Jennings. My blood ran cold. Even I knew that name. Councilman Jennings was the biggest fish the Oak Haven PD had ever hooked. A multi-year investigation into corruption, kickbacks, and embezzlement that was set to go to trial next month. It was the case that was going to define Chief Miller's career and send a powerful local politician to prison for a very long time. And the primary evidence was in that box. "Get it," Miller whispered, his voice hoarse. Wearing a pair of thick nitrile gloves, I carefully waded into the sludge and lifted the box. It was heavy, waterlogged, and felt like it was about to disintegrate in my hands. I carried it back to the dry hallway and set it on a plastic sheet. With Harding and Miller looking over my shoulder, I carefully pried open the sodden flaps. Inside was a single, solid brick of what used to be paper. Ledgers, signed affidavits, bank statements, marked bills, all of it had melded together into a pulpy, foul-smelling mass. The ink had bled from every page, creating abstract blue and black clouds. It was completely, utterly, and irredeemably destroyed. Harding slumped against the wall, his face a mask of defeat. "It's over," he whispered. "He's going to walk. All of it. Everything. Gone." The humor of the situation was gone. The absurdity had curdled into tragedy. Carol's petty act of suburban vengeance wasn't just going to cost the city a fortune in cleanup fees. It was going to let a major criminal walk free. For the first time all day, I looked at the mess in front of me and thought, I don't think I can fix this. We all stood there in silence for a long moment. The only sounds the hum of the dehumidifiers and the distant gurgle of Gus's pump. The weight of our failure settled in the air, thick and cloying as the bio-sludge on the floor. Then, a flicker of an idea. A long shot. A crazy, expensive, probably not gonna work idea, but it was the only one I had. I looked at the brick of pulpy evidence. I looked at Maria, who was watching me with a worried expression. "Get the portable freeze dryer," I said. Harding looked at me like I'd just started speaking in tongues. "The what?" "The Phoenix FD 5000, I said, my brain already kicking into high gear. "It's a laboratory-grade vacuum freeze dryer. We use it for restoring priceless, water-damaged documents. Or in this case, a brick of legal pulp." I started pacing, the plan forming as I spoke. "It's a process called sublimation. We flash freeze this entire block solid down to about -50 Celsius. Then we put it in a powerful vacuum chamber. The vacuum lowers the boiling point of the ice so that it turns directly from a solid into a vapor, skipping the liquid stage entirely. It sucks the water molecules right out of the paper fibers without the damaging effects of evaporation." I stopped and looked at the stunned faces of Miller and Harding. "It's a technique they use for restoring flood-damaged library archives. It's delicate, it's expensive as hell, and it has about a 50-50 shot of working. Or," I added with a grim smile, "it might just turn the whole thing into a very expensive pile of paper-scented dust. But right now, 50-50 is the best odds we've got." Miller looked at the soggy mess, then back at me. "Do it," he said, his voice firm. "Whatever it costs, do it." The next few hours were a symphony of controlled chaos. While Maria and a junior tech carefully prepped the Jennings evidence block for its cryogenic gamble, the rest of us went to war with the room. I felt like the conductor of a very strange, very loud orchestra. Gus, now in a full-body hazmat suit that made him look like a character from a sci-fi movie, wrestled with Big Bertha's hoses, directing the last of the sludge into a specialized hazardous waste container. He moved with a grace that was startling for a man his size, his movements economical and precise. Inside the room, A half-dozen of my techs, also in full PPE, swarmed over the space. They set up a forest of high-powered air movers, their roaring fans creating a miniature hurricane that whipped around the empty shelves. In the corners, our blue LGR dehumidifiers hummed to life, their digital displays already showing the sky-high humidity levels as they began to suck moisture out of the very air, concrete, and drywall. The noise was deafening, a roaring testament to our assault on entropy. Maria was at her command station, a blur of motion. She had conscripted a shell-shocked officer Ramirez to help, and he was surprisingly good at it. Under her watchful eye, he was photographing every single piece of recovered evidence, every baggie, every soggy envelope, before scanning its newly assigned barcode. Maria's fingers flew across her waterproof keyboard, logging each item, its location, its condition, and its destination in the secure room Miller had cleared out upstairs. It was a masterclass in organized recovery. Sparky Dave had arrived, taken one look at the water-streaked electrical panel, and started muttering a string of curses that was so creative it was almost poetry. He worked with a surgeon's focus, testing circuits, rerouting power, and ensuring our massive array of equipment didn't blow the entire station's grid back to the Stone Age. I was everywhere at once. I was on the phone with a city official arguing about the emergency budget override for the biohazard disposal. I was consulting with Gus on the optimal placement of the air movers to create a vortex effect. I was reassuring Chief Miller, who was pacing like a caged animal. I was giving Ramirez a crash course in moisture meter readings. It was exhausting, exhilarating work. We were no longer just cleaning up a mess. We were taking it back. In the middle of this maelstrom, Chief Miller got a call. He listened for a moment, a slow, predatory grin spreading across his face. "Got it," he said, and beckoned to me and Harding. "You're going to want to see this." He led us to his office, away from the roar. On his computer screen was a video file. He clicked play. The image was the grainy, black-and-white view from a security camera in a drab maintenance hallway. "This is the corridor outside the utility closet, right next to the evidence room," Miller narrated. The timestamp in the corner read 3:08 p.m. The footage showed Carol arguing with a janitor, gesturing angrily at his cleaning cart. The janitor, looking defeated, finally pushed his cart away. Carol watched him go. Then her head swiveled, checking the empty hall. She scurried to a door marked "Utility Closet, No Admittance," and slipped inside. The camera couldn't see into the closet, but a moment later, the door opened and she came out, wiping her hands on her pants. She gave one last hateful look down the hall, and then walked briskly away. The timestamp read 3:10 p.m. Miller fast-forwarded the video. At 3:14 p.m., a dark stain appeared on the ceiling tiles in the video. A second later, the tiles gave way and water began to pour down. He leaned back in his chair, the grin now stretching from ear to ear. The janitor confirmed it. She was complaining he was blocking her path. When we interviewed her after you had her thrown out, she claimed she'd never even been in the basement. My detectives found the utility closet door wiped clean, but they missed a partial print on the inside of the door jamb. It's a match. He steepled his fingers. Malicious destruction of property, tampering with a government facility, perjury, multiple felonies. The HOA queen has been dethroned. Permanently. A huge weight lifted. We had her. The source of all this chaos was going to face real, actual consequences. It was a victory, but the war wasn't over. The final battle was still taking place inside a humming, freezing machine in the hallway, and just then, the machine beeped. A loud, clear tone that cut through the noise of the restoration effort. The cycle was complete. A crowd gathered. Me, Maria, Miller, Harding, Ramirez, even Gus, who had just peeled off his hazmat hood. The air was thick with tension. All our work, all the money, all the effort would be for nothing if this didn't work. The Jennings case, and a good chunk of the city's faith in its justice system, was inside that box. Maria, wearing a pair of insulated cryogenic gloves, opened the heavy door of the freeze dryer. A cloud of intensely cold, dry vapor billowed out. She reached in and carefully lifted out the block of paper. It was no longer a pulpy, wet mass. It was now a solid, frosty brick, light as a feather. She placed it carefully on the table. Nobody breathed. I picked up a pair of delicate, long-nosed tweezers, my hand surprisingly steady. I touched the corner of the top page. It was stiff, brittle feeling. I gently, so gently, began to lift. The page separated from the one below it with a faint, crisp whisper. And the ink was there. Faded, a little fuzzy around the edges, but it was there. Clear. Legible. A column of numbers under the heading. Jennings Construction. Consulting fees. April. A collective gasp went through our little group. I lifted the next page. And the next. They were all the same. Intact. Saved. Harding let out a shaky breath and leaned against the wall, rubbing his face. He looked at me, and for the first time all the skepticism and hostility was gone, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated respect. "I'll be damned, Romano," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You actually did it." I allowed myself a small, tight, triumphant smile. I looked at the rescued documents, at my exhausted team, at the relieved chief. "Never doubt the power of applied thermodynamics," I said, unable to resist the final word. "And a ridiculously, obscenely large budget." The next afternoon, I sat in my office, my sanctuary. It was quiet again. Outside, the sun was shining. In the city across town, the Oak Haven Police Department was still a mess, but it was a dry mess. All the evidence was secure. All the criminals were still on track for prison. And Carol was, I'd been gleefully informed by Chief Miller, currently explaining to a judge why her bail should be set at less than the value of a small private island. My work was done. All that was left was the reckoning. Chief Miller came by my office personally. He looked 10 years younger. He shook my hand so hard I thought he might dislocate my shoulder. He thanked me, he thanked my team, he thanked my mother for bringing me into this world. Then I handed him the bill. It was my masterpiece. A 17-page itemized invoice that was a work of art in and of itself. Every hour of labor, every piece of equipment, every disposable biohazard suit was accounted for. There were line items for emergency mobilization fee, Category 3 contaminant surcharge, 24-hour continuous operation premium, and my personal favorite, a $50 charge for one artisanal pastrami sandwich, emotionally distressed. He took the invoice, his eyes scanning the pages. They got wider and wider. When he got to the final page, to the grand total at the bottom, all the color drained from his face. He clutched his chest in a genuinely theatrical gesture of pain. "Leo," he wheezed, "the city council is going to have me executed in the town square." I shrugged, leaning back in my chair. "Tell them it's cheaper than letting a dozen felons walk. And besides," I said with a sly grin, "once your civil suit against Carol is settled, her assets should cover a good chunk of it. I hear that ficus tree of hers is a collector's item." He laughed, a real booming laugh this time. He shook his head, folded the invoice, and tucked it into his jacket pocket like it was a live grenade. "Whatever you charge, Romano, it's worth it. Thank you." He left, and I was alone. Truly alone. The chaos was over. The battle was won. I went to my office mini-fridge and retrieved a small, waxed paper-wrapped package. Inside was another pastrami on rye, an exact replica of the one I had lost in what felt like another lifetime. I had instructed Maria to have it delivered, a bonus for a job well done. I sat at my desk. I unwrapped it. It was perfect. The smell of the rye, the spicy tang of the mustard, the peppery aroma of the meat. This was my reward, my moment of zen. I closed my eyes. I lifted the sandwich to my mouth. This time I was going to make it. This bite was going to happen. And then the phone rang. The red phone. I froze, sandwich hovering inches from my lips. I stared at the blinking light on the caller ID. It read, Mayor's Office. A wave of cosmic exhaustion washed over me. I knew, with the certainty of a man who has seen the abyss and invoiced it, that my moment of peace was gone. With a sigh that came from the very depths of my soul, I put the sandwich down. I picked up the receiver. Leo, I said, my voice a flat line of utter resignation. Mr. Romano, the mayor speaking? The voice was impossibly cheerful. I'm just calling to say I heard what you did over at the police station. Absolutely incredible work. A true civic hero. Just doing my job, Mr. Mayor. Nonsense. We were so impressed, the city council and I had an emergency meeting. We want to offer Phoenix Restoration a citywide disaster readiness contract. You will be our go-to for any unfortunate situations. My heart sank. A contract. More calls, more chaos. That's wonderful news, sir, I said, trying to sound grateful. Fantastic. Now, speaking of which, he said, his voice dropping slightly, I was hoping you could do me a small favor to kick things off. It seems we have a small moisture problem down at the mansion. I closed my eyes. A moisture problem, sir? Yes, a tiny one. A pipe in the wine cellar. Nothing to worry about. I took a deep breath. Mr. Mayor? I asked slowly. Is it HOA president with a grudge small or just biblical flood small? There was a nervous chuckle on the other end. Let's just say the 78 Bordeaux is looking a little damp. Can you handle it? I looked at my perfect, uneaten sandwich. It mocked me with its silent, delicious beauty. My fate was sealed. I was Sisyphus, but my boulder was made of water damage and incompetence, and I was the only one who knew how to push it. Right, I said into the phone, my voice devoid of all emotion. I'll deploy the team.